Australia's future fund to invest in housing infrastructure and energy transition under new mandate. This article got my attention today basically because it's got something to do with housing. The government have found more money to put into housing, and that raised my eyebrows because anything a current day government, whether it be left or right, is doing to fix the housing issue, I'm going to be skeptical towards. Saw this article here, thought I'd give it a read because there's got to be some holes in it somewhere. So first of all, I thought, future fund. I actually don't know what that is. I don't know what the definition is. To me, it just sounds like it's a sovereign wealth fund. It's money put away by our government. It's meant to grow. It's meant to make profit. And straight away I thought, well, if it's meant to make profit, it's meant to solve the housing crisis. They're kind of two different things. Whenever you get something where you're trying to solve two different things, it's always really questionable. And when you've been in business for a long time, those sorts of things become clearer to you. Let's go through the article. First, what I've done is I've actually gone to the Future Fund website to confirm what the sovereign wealth fund is, and it's basically what it is. As a sovereign wealth fund, we manage money on behalf of the federal government. You can see here on I think it's this article here, the future fund is Australia's sovereign wealth fund, so it's the same thing, established to invest for the benefit of future generations of Australian. Its investment mandate requires the future fund to deliver investment returns of CPI, so basically inflation, plus 4 or 5% over the long term. So yeah, it is what it sounds like. Basically, it sounds like the federal government's telling the future fund to invest in property so that they can make money. Are they putting money into property to make money, or are they putting property into money to help solve the housing crisis? Because from an outsider, I would say a part of the problem with this housing crisis, and there's a lot of problems, I would say a part of the problem is that there's people seeking to make money out of housing, which should probably be seen as a utility, right? Because the whole reason we have a government in our society is to help deliver the stuff we want and need the most. Security is that, a roof over our head is that, and it kind of feels as if this is at odds. Anyway, let's get into the article. Australia's $230 billion sovereign wealth fund will be retooled to help build houses, improve infrastructure, and combat global heating under a new investment mandate. The global heating one would raise my eyebrows as well. You can sit on whatever side of the kind of argument you want on that. I would be wanting to see how that's going to make money, how that's going to make 4 or 5% above CPI. Those sorts of economical questions, based on what I've seen, and I'm no economist, but based on what I've seen, fudged by modelling, which is just a guess. The fund will have to consider national priorities, including increasing the domestic supply of residential housing. They're splitting reasons why this fund exists, so they're making it more complex in nature. So one of the things I've noticed about the way we live is that there is a lot of complexity to the times we live in. There is so much complexity. You just have to turn the news on and kind of just be looking at the sorts of topics that are being talked about. And things are really complex. So throwing complexity onto an idea of a sovereign wealth fund doesn't really make sense to me. The government is hoping a greater certainty of investment in assets that have long-term benefits and will encourage more housing supply and clean energy projects. Again, they're just saying, well, this is what we want. There's $230 billion of assets here. You have to go buy some of what we want because of why we want it. It's a different why. Again, talks about the benchmark growth. Treasurer Jim Chalmers and Finance Minister Katie Gallagher said the changes will mean more investment where we need it most, but not at the expense of returns. So they've said it, not at the expense of returns. So what's glaringly obvious is those returns, they're getting them from somewhere. Where are they getting the returns from? They're getting returns from, obviously, people that need to pay rent and people that need to buy property. So the whole idea of a sovereign wealth fund is, to me, it just sounds like they're taking money from people that need it now, assumingly people that need the money in the future. The sovereign wealth fund just invests in other projects. So yeah, they're taking money from the poor now to give money to the poor later. It feels to me like the poor are really struggling right now. The government remains committed to the fund's independence and commercial focus. Well, Doesn't sound like that's the case. There's two things I want to say about property in general. I know the government are saying here they want to increase supply, but are they increasing supply by tipping more money into the market? To me, that sounds like they're increasing demand. The thing is, once you start digging into the property issue, you start realizing part of the problem is that our wages are too high. And I guess that is what it is. Like, you can't fix that. But our wages are too high. Costs for builders and developers are too high. There is not enough builders and developers to build all the properties that we need. We've seen this, and this is the argument about the government saying they want to build whatever it is, 1.2 million homes in 10 years, I think is the figure. Who's going to build the properties? This is a problem that you can't throw money at. Like, you could get all the money in the world. If the builders aren't there to build it, then the houses aren't going to get built. This is more demand for land, for real estate, and not providing necessarily an increased supply of housing. I don't think that there is a problem with the supply of money going into the property market. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is the supply of available dwellings. And sure, there's a number of reasons for that, and feel free to chuck them in the comments. But this is, a desperate measure. So it feels like the government are panicking, and they're just figuring out ways of how can we spend more money, without spending it off our kind of annual budget. Second thing I want to note is that it's what I've noticed over the last kind of 15 years of this property market, and I've been in finance the last 18 years. So I've started paying attention to it, obviously, whilst I've been in finance. And that is that governments will do anything to backstop the property market. For the last 15 years, there's always been a part of Australia that is upset, disappointed, and angry about the way the property market's been going. And there's clear reason for that. And I really sympathise with a lot of those people, and I'm part of that, because it's making Australia a worse place, in my opinion. But the thing is, the reality is the government will do anything to backstop this, and we've got 15 years of proof. We've got first home buyer schemes. In 2020, it started out with the first home owner grant. It's state by state. There's national stuff. There's all sorts of stuff going on. The federal government want to bring in Help to Buy, which is they pitch in 40% towards your purchase. Just crazy stuff. This is the thing. People are going to understand we're just living in crazy times. Things don't act in a normal sort of way. The rule of thumb is that whilst things look bad and it looks like things can't continue, they can. I say this quite a lot to people, because people that are getting screwed over, and there are, because the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer at an accelerated rate, especially the last 5 years. People think, it can't go on forever and it has to turn around. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you look into history, the gap between the rich and the poor can get way more drastic than that. Australia was founded off massive gaps between rich and the poor, because all these people went to prison in England, in Britain in the 1800s, and you'll hear these stories for stealing loaves of bread or for these petty crimes. And the reason is the poor were so poor, they had to resort to these sorts of things just to feed their family. The gap between the rich and the poor was so big. Another example in terms of Australia, the £10 Poms. These were the guys that we immigrated from England, obviously, post World War II. We got them here because we paid for their boat fare. They had to pay £10 to come to Australia and get a shot at the Australian dream, the great Australian dream. Well, what is the great Australian dream? The great Australian dream is to buy a property. So clearly they came over here to get a shot at that. The reason they came over here to get a shot at that is because the gap between the rich and the poor was massive. They didn't have the shot. So this argument that people naturally think things have to turn around, well, history says they can go the other way as well. Hopefully that doesn't happen. The thing is that the government are going to do anything to backstop this property market. This is just further proof of that. This is just, okay, how can we find some money from somewhere else? Another example, before I leave you, is another one of Labor's policies, build to rent, is basically just getting rich corporations to build towers to fix the housing supply issue, but they're not building them to sell them. No, that's what a normal developer would do, but they're building them to rent them out, and they'll get government kickbacks to do that. That, to me, is just selling our land to multinational corporations so they can make a profit. And guess what? corporations don't make a little bit of profit. They maximize the profit. So that's going to drive up rent. Sure, you get housing supply issues, but you basically just get people on the hook for life. They become so poor at the expense of a corporation that they can't actually save up for property. So this is the way things are going. It's the way things have been going for a long time. So the reason I run my own mortgage brokerage is to help people financially. Clearly over the last 13 years, which is how long I've been in business, that's gotten harder to do. The reason why I post this content is so that people can make decisions, taking into account different perspectives. So a lot of this stuff you're not going to hear on mass media, or your typical mortgage broker isn't going to talk about this sort of stuff. The decisions you make are the right decisions for you. A lot of people would say buy a property straight away. I don't necessarily agree with that, because you got to repay the debt. But the realities are, you do need a place to live also. So I really just hope that the way I look at things help people to make a decision. Sometimes it kind of scares people because it does expose how drastic things are. Clearly things weren't drastic this 15 years ago. Anyway, if you want to leave a comment, or you disagree or anything, leave a comment below. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Cheers.